Good evening, you're with GB News. In a moment, headliners first. The top stories tonight. And the Prime Minister hasn't commented on potential spy balloons being spotted over the UK, as a fifth object has now been shot down over North America. The United States says it's not yet able to identify recent objects found in their airspace this week, though it has said it's determined China has a high-altitude balloon programme to gather intelligence. Rishi Sunak says the UK has the military capability to keep the nation's skies safe.
We have something called the Quick Reaction Alert Force, which involves Typhoon planes, which are kept on 24/7 readiness to police our airspace, which is incredibly important. I can't obviously comment in detail on national security matters, but we're in constant touch with our allies. And as I said, we'll do whatever it takes to keep the country safe.
Now, UEFA says it bears primary responsibility for failures which almost led to the Champions League final last May becoming a mass fatality catastrophe. That's according to a new independent report. Thousands of Liverpool fans, including children, were penned in against fences outside Paris's Stade de France. Supporters were tear-gassed by police and entry to the game against Real Madrid was closed after turnstiles at the Liverpool end of the stadium became blocked by thousands of people who UEFA initially said had purchased fake tickets. However, the report says there's no evidence to support that claim. UEFA has now apologised and says it's committed to learning from the events. Rescuers in southern Turkey have saved at least 8 more people trapped underneath rubble today, a week after devastating earthquakes which shook the region. One was a 13-year-old boy and another was a 10-year-old girl. They were pulled out alive from under collapsed buildings, having been buried for more than 180 hours. But more than 37,000 people in both Turkey and Syria are now known to have died in the disaster, as officials say the window to find any remaining survivors is closing. And here, an appeal by the UK's Disasters Emergency Committee has so far raised more than £60 million. And finally, tomorrow, supermarket shelves will be cleared of Valentine's Day gifts to make way for Easter eggs, of course. But in the Midlands, they've had an extra problem. West Mercia police were made aware of a man trying to steal almost 200,000 cream eggs. The chocolate treats, worth around £40,000, were stolen from a lock-up unit in Stafford Park in Telford on Saturday. Shortly after the theft, police managed to stop a car on the motorway and arrested a 32-year-old man on suspicion of theft, pleased they'd cracked another crime. Excellent. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. You're with GB News. Time now for headliners.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Welcome to Headliners. Joining me tonight, 2 top comedians and headliner stalwarts. We have Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon. But before we let them talk, let's have a quick look at Tuesday's front pages. Kicking off, as usual, with the Daily Mail. Rishi says that the RAF are ready to shoot down spy balloons. Sounds like they've downgraded their ambitions somewhat, doesn't it? The Telegraph, police use of Chinese drones risks UK security. The Eye have Hunt urged to boost defence spending or risk failing to defer. I think that's deter Putin. And The Guardian, police missed chance to arrest Cousins as sex offender suspect. Images there from the horrible earthquake in Syria. Meanwhile, The Times exposed the secret plot to sink tougher sewage rules, and an unfortunate accompanying image of poor old Camilla there, who has nothing to do with any of that. The Star, we can't rule out aliens. I think that's the spy balloons again. So those were your front pages. So let us kick things off, Leo, with a look at the front page of the Daily Mail.
Yeah, so Britain is ready to shoot down Chinese spy balloons, says Rishi Sunak. Tough on balloons, tough on the causes of balloons. is a new mantra for the Tory party. He says he's going to take, the government's going to do whatever it takes to keep the UK safe, even if it stretches to using a broom handle with a drawing pin on the end of it. Yeah, I love this. I mean, he can't deal with inflation, strikes or the NHS, but he can deal with some balloons.
They love ordering the armed forces around a little bit as well, don't they? Especially if it's not actually likely to trigger a war. It's a win-win
yeah.
point of view. What do you think, Nick? Is it a genuine security alert, or are these weather balloons that they're using to distract us from what's actually going on?
I don't know about the balloons themselves. I'm suspicious of our military capabilities because we were recently told that we can't even defend ourselves and our military is up to nothing. Now Sunak's talking about typhoon planes that are on 24/7 readiness. My theory is he was caught out in the kitchen and he did a kind of Kaiser Soze with some Thai-fu tea.
Yeah.
We've got typhoon planes, and they're based in Yorkshire tea. I mean, Yorkshire.
They've got these special PG tips.
Yeah. Obviously, I've got to keep
my
it PG because of the the national security. I think he did a Kaiser Soze because he's there saying it's quite convenient. I can't say too much because of national security, but we've totally got typhoon planes ready within 20
It
20
definitely
seconds.
feels, though, doesn't it? Like, it's hard to imagine a less fearsome foe. I mean, they may well be taking, valuable shots of airfields. Well, I can't imagine what you can see of Britain from above that you couldn't glean from walking through a high street.
Well, we're protected by our cloud cover. This is something they don't have in Montana.
Yeah.
Our inclement weather is going to keep us safe from prying.
But they're not going to be armed, are they, spy balloons? There's not going to be any They're not even going to be wreckage. I mean, at least when the Soviets shot down the U-2 and Gary Powers was taken prisoner, at least there was the potential for a falling wing to kind of slice through a gulag. It's like... It's just so pathetic. I don't know. It feels like this is the final iteration of our defencelessness in a way.
Yeah,
Exposed by a balloon.
Yeah, shaking our fist at it.
Apparently, they're really difficult to shoot down because they're so high up. They go above. They go to an altitude much higher than a plane can go.
Right.
So you need
Even
a
than a
missile to
typhoon.
fire from the plane that will then go up and hit the balloon. Then it's really hard to hit a balloon because it's a balloon. There's no hard surface for the missile to strike and explode.
I think you might be right about your pin on the end of a broomstick. Well, it's certainly good news for anyone who's been looking for a good excuse not to waste good money on a hot air ride tomorrow. The hot air balloons, they're a popular Valentine's Day gift.
Oh, really?
These days.
Not this week.
Very expensive.
Playing into China's hands, that.
That's right. So our next front page is The Telegraph, Nick, which is usually stacked with every story of the day.
Yeah, it's more on the sort of soft war with China. It's police use of Chinese drones risks UK security. We've been very, very slow and very naive about the whole threat from China because we're using these drones and they're made by a company, DJI, that is already listed as a national security risk in the US and blacklisted. We've been using them, and what we're not realising is that the drones are suddenly going to say, hail the CCP and turn against us at any minute because there's also the issue of the apps that run them and fly them, and they can get your information, basically TikTok or whatever. It's the same problem as TikTok. It's the same problem as everything. We're using China, but we're at war with China, kind of. And so Suella Braverman says she has concerns about it, which is nice. But Liz Truss, who's been tougher on this than Sunak, is going to come back in her first public speech since quitting, and she's going to say, why are you weak on China, to Sunak, apparently. And he's going to say we need to find a balance, because, of course, she can be a bit more reckless now. She wants to get revenge, whereas he's in a more sort of diplomatic position.
That's a good idea from her point of view, isn't it? I mean, it is kind of weird, isn't it? I don't know where we stood on Krupp's kitchenware in the late 1930s, but it does feel a little bit like that at the moment. Like we're just kind of going, yeah, but they make so much stuff, don't they? I mean, do you know what I mean?
5G communications equipment, servers, all this stuff that our communication infrastructure is sort of the foundations of it, that they can then, get into the back end and steal our data. And obviously the trouble is, wars, as we've seen in Ukraine, wars depend on drones so much. We don't want to be relying on China for drones if we go to war with China. They can be like, well, you're not getting any more drones while you're at war.
We're just going to disable the ones you already have.
Yeah.
It's a tricky one as well, because I think the suspicion when you hear about spying is you normally imagine, and we're talking about government secrets, but of course a lot of it's industrial espionage, isn't it, as well? They're just getting the data they need in order to function at a commercial level better than us, more powerfully. You don't need much of an edge in that kind of scenario. You don't necessarily need to know about the new nuclear reactor. It might simply be,
No, and it's all about the semiconductors now, isn't it?
Yeah.
That they want to get from Taiwan. There's all that.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting. Anything else on the front page of the Telegraph you want to draw attention to?
Well, we're doing most of it later, I think.
There's the Charles Moore has written a column in the bottom left-hand corner there about Nigel Biggar and his book about colonialism actually getting published. I imagine GBNews has covered that.
I covered it on the Daily Skeptic. Bloomsbury basically cancelled it after saying it was this amazing book, and now I think William Collins is releasing it.
HarperCollins have brought it out, yeah.
Does it say colonialism is good, then?
That was the thing. It said the empire. It gave a balanced view of the empire.
Right.
Bloomsbury were like, this is amazing. But then some other person at Bloomsbury got hold of it and said, oh, public feeling, it's not the right time to release this because of public feeling. One of our best historians. Yeah, it's absolutely pathetic.
It has actually really kind of brought this whole thing into sharp relief, and I think a lot of people are quite pleased to see that HarperCollins have gone with it, and now it's like #1 bestseller in history on Amazon and stuff.
Right.
Spiked, to be fair, reviewed it and said it was actually a bit too favourable about the Empire, and Spiked fairly
well,
he may have swung the other way, but
I'm
going to have to actually read it before I give a strong opinion. But I'm pleased to see it's in print. The Guardian, Leo.
So The Guardian running with police missed chances to arrest Wayne Couzens as a sex offender suspect. So there are clear chances. He's obviously been pleaded guilty to 3 counts of I think exposing himself to people. He exposed himself 3 times, and 3 times he was caught and arrested and charged for. 3 times, and witnesses recorded either full registration details of his vehicles or partial details and reported it to the police, and the police did nothing, and they left him to continue serving as a Metropolitan Police officer with a gun, or entrusted to a gun, and obviously went on to commit that horrific murder.
Sarah Everard.
And one of the incidents was just 6 days before that. So if the police had done their job and just apprehended him, then perhaps she'd still be alive.
Yeah, it's often the case, isn't it, when you get a case that kind of triggers and provokes a whole slew of debate about how laws need to change and how culture needs to change. You just think, just do your job with the rules that are already in place, and this wouldn't have happened.
Yeah. It's astonishing that and they didn't even expect him to plead guilty to these 3 charges of indecent exposure, but he has. They got stuff, like Leo says, from his number plates, from his phone data, and then Lee Anderson's been in the news for saying that there's nothing wrong with the death penalty. If there was ever a case for the death penalty, this is a good candidate.
It's very interesting, that, isn't it? Because I've seen various arguments back and forth, and they're always the old ones with the death penalty, but a lot of them seem to rest on a kind of notion of the slippery slope, which is interesting because the slippery slope is always used as an argument, usually by Liberals, against reactionary measures, isn't it? But that's what they say with this one. If once you bring it in, for heinous crimes of this kind, before you know it, you're having to, you're having to hang men who have,
I'm not convinced.
Killed a burglar in their own garden or something when he was coming at them with a machete. You wouldn't. I think even if you just took one out like this a year.
One a year. With people where the technology,
it could be like the lottery.
Yeah, exactly.
Where technology has made it, incontrovertible. Why not do it? It was brought in the 60s by a radical leftist.
Yes.
Most British people believe in it for things like child murder and terrorist murders.
And as you say, the extent to which DNA evidence, and it's not absolutely foolproof, but you can really ratchet it up to a chance in a billion.
Yeah, and we're bringing through euthanasia.
Yes.
Some countries that are really advanced with it, like in Canada, where if you can't afford your bills or you're going through mental difficulties or
your team lost at the weekend.
Basically, you got a bad hangover, you can just phone up the government to come round and do you in.
People are happy to have a military, but then they say we can't have the state killing people. It's like, well, what's the military now? So it's the arguments are often pretty thin.
It is interesting. I mean, you're a Christian, Nick, and I know one of the things that gets brought up a lot is life ultimately sacred, and if the state accepts that it has the right to take life away, then that undermines the notion that life is sacred. But if you've already got the state offering euthanasia, then that seems to sort of nibble away at that beforehand.
I'm going back to the Old Testament, eye for an eye. We had it right there. Why did we change that?
Vengeance is mine, saith the state.
I love that, though. Just 3 people advocating the death penalty. You'll see that on many channels.
From all different sides. We've got the atheist point of view. There's Presbyterian and the Catholic.
But all pro.
Finally, what are our friends at the Daily Star going with, Nick?
In a sharp left turn, let's go on to aliens. As the Americans shoot down a 4th mysterious object flying in their airspace, a top military commander reveals we can't rule out aliens. And they've got E.T. going, that you, Mum, because it's the Star. But it is a serious story. I mean, in the aliens are real, that's quite big, isn't it? I mean, Star had the other day, the sun was broken and no other papers were covering it. Bits were coming off the sun. Now they've got aliens. These are big stories. So General Glenn Van Herk has said that he hasn't ruled out anything and he's leaving it to counterintelligence because he doesn't know what this is. There was one that was thought to be China, but then there's sightings over Alaska, Michigan and Canada that have been hard to classify. And, you know, so it looks like aliens are real, guys. And there's that meme I saw the other day. It was two aliens, and it said, one of them saying, can we land yet? And the other one said, no, it's too early. At the moment, they're trying to change the weather by eating bugs. It's like... So that's maybe why I haven't seen them.
Bit like with Douglas Adams and the civilization that was in the early 80s, who were so primitive they still thought digital watches were a pretty neat idea. That one. I suppose there is a sort of slight, maybe, I don't know if it's a serious point, but the most serious I can make out of this, is there some extent to which every so often the government quite like you to have a debate about UFOs because it's you know...
It distracts.
I did say that. Now that they're saying they're real, now I don't believe it. Yeah. Because I'm like, why are they suddenly saying it's real? So, yeah.
That would be much more the US government, though. I don't think the UK government. I think we know what kind of distracts us. It's sport, basically, isn't it? Sport and weather. You know, it's pictures of the crowds all descending on Brighton Beach. The idea of UFOs is very much a kind of rural, kind of Ohio kind of thing.
I grew up in the Scottish countryside and I saw a UFO. Me and my friends were going for a walk in the hills, might have eaten some, you know, things
edibles.
we found on the ground. Like, we saw, it was dusk and we're looking down this valley and this disc was coming towards us. You can see the lights on the edge of the disc and we were like preparing speeches. We were, this is definitely... And then it got closer and it was like 7 planes flying in formation. That's what the dots...
I sat up on a hill in Buckinghamshire about 3 years ago with a couple of mates, and we may have had a slightly consciousness-altering event earlier in the evening, and we were staring at we couldn't find it on the map anywhere, this huge tower. It wasn't an alien thing, it was just a very high tower with lights going up and down it, like in a kind of fairground thing. We're thinking, is it part of a fairground? We realised it was the A40. It was just, we were in such perfect alignment with it.
I was going to say, Leo undermined his own story. He started by edibles and it was dark, it was dusk. I mean, you just ruined your own story, but then
the Northern Lights. That's all for part one. Coming up, we take a deeper look into the papers and talk about more nightmares for Sturgeon, Angela Rayner's scandalous spending, and how the Bank of Mum and Dad might not be that great for the country anyway. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prisons?
I
don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes.
Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. I'm Simon Evans. Tonight I'm in the company of two top comedians, Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon. Leo, Telegraph first. It sounds like I no longer need to pretend to understand the Northern Ireland backstop.
Oh, yeah, wouldn't it be great? I mean, it's just so boring. All this Brexit stuff. I mean, nobody voted for boringness.
No.
Like, this is ridiculous. But there's going to be a new Brexit deal as the Northern Ireland deadlock comes to an end. It's going to be announced in the next fortnight after the UK watered down its hardline resistance to European judges' rulings on issues in Northern Ireland. So under the new plan, goods travelling from the mainland UK destined only for Northern Ireland, so not for Ireland itself, will not face physical customs checks thanks to a new system of red and green lanes.
It sounds like the most basic system that's been in place in airports since the late 17th century.
It also sounds very easy, very open to exploitation. So, you could get things through one lane, say it's going to Northern Ireland and then, send it to Europe.
Maybe.
So it'll create this almost borderless, frictionless area of trade with Europe.
It might well do, and it might actually be a way forward generally. But I said this at the time, it's only a question of will. If there is a will to find a way forward, you will always find one.
Yeah.
And if there is a will to use a potential problem as an obstacle to achieving a certain end, then that is what will happen.
And the will, since Brexit happened, Europe has been, wanting to cause problems for Britain, and Britain has been, sticking its feet in.
Yeah, sticking its heels in.
Yeah, sticking its heels in because it didn't want to be seen to be sort of giving too much to Europe. But now that I think with Putin reminding us that actually we're all kind of
also it's nearly 7 years past now, isn't it, since the original vote? I mean, there comes a point.
There's no danger of other countries.
No.
Europe was worried that other countries would follow Britain's lead and leave Europe, but that danger has passed. So now everybody's being a bit pallier.
Although I think Italy might still be potentially still think quickly is the best option. Although spout, I think, as well. Do you know about spout?
No.
That's Spain. That's my word for Spain.
That's not bad. Spout. Are they going to spout?
I don't think they're going to spout. Their main threat is Scotland's independence, isn't it? Triggering a Catalan. But again, as Ed West, who I often quote on this programme, demonstrated, the demographics don't support it. There's not enough angry young men in Catalonia anymore to actually get out and make life difficult. What do we have next? Daily Mail, Nick. 3 years on Angela's earbuds.
This is an important story. Angela Rayner defends buying an iPad and £249 personalised AirPods on expenses as she slams scandalous spending on government procurement cards. So, of course, it's about hypocrisy. And obviously, Labour are hypocrites, but it's my satirical, non-legal opinion. But basically, this thing about the £240, AirPods personalised. I mean, I got personalised.
It's no,
what it meant. No extra. It just puts your name on the charging case. I'm like, you may as well just for safekeeping.
Yeah.
So that's
otherwise you're
really...
going to scratch it in with the end of a compass point.
Yes,
or something.
exactly. So that's pretty minor to me. But apparently there was an iPad that cost around $1,600, and she said,
that is top of the range. I mean, she must have to do some wicked art stuff.
She claims she's had it for like 3 years, and she's using it for work. She's like, I'm speaking to you on it right now. She told Times Radio. Now my problem there is, she's not self-employed. Like, if you're claiming expenses as self-employed, because self-employed basically get screwed in basically every other way, so I think it's fair enough. And, comedians mostly haven't paid... They pay less tax than drug dealers, don't they? Or they're about as off the grid as Gene Hackman in Enemy of the State, just surrounded by electricity, so, nothing can get into them. But anyway... So, as a self-employed person, it's reasonable to claim expenses. My thing is pay MPs more. They don't have to keep doing these dodgy expenses. Because why should she, even though it's kind of minor, why should she really get it paid for when she's already got a wage?
I know, I do understand what you mean, because she's not technically but it's still a fairly minor cost. But on the other hand, 1,600 quid is a lot. I would struggle to find an iPod. I thought the top of the range one was about 1,200 quid.
Yeah, but if the taxpayer's paying, you can find it.
You
find it. And if somebody else is paying, this is why the government shouldn't be in charge of spending money.
No.
And people in the government, if you're spending your own money, you're going to get an iPad for much less money than that. If you're spending somebody else's money, it's like, hey, let's go nuts. So it's nuts. But I agree with Nick that MPs' salaries have traditionally been pretty low because they knew that they could then top that up with a big whack of expenses. So then that whole expenses scandal was, it left a bit of a sour taste in the mouth.
It rocked a lot of people. I think what they should do now is vote a massive pay increase, but they've got to put it forward to Parliament, so we've got plenty of time to vote them out before they get it.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? If they vote it in for the present Parliament, then it's obviously bent, isn't it?
Right, yeah.
You've got to have a decent pay gap. But anyway, I still think Angela Rayner, to be honest, it's the least of my worries, is that she's got a fancy iPad. I just wonder what app she... But anyway, The Guardian now, shockingly, differing levels of wealth is stoking inequality and indeed access to negative equity.
Yeah, this is news apparently. So the Bank of Mum and Dad is stoking Britain's rising inequality, according to a report by the Institute of Fiscal Studies, which said that parents would overall in the UK provide £17 billion worth of monetary gifts and informal loans this year. Most transfers come from the over 50s to children in their late 20s and early 30s. I think I got a bill from my dad, but yeah. So the help amounts to, on average, £6.5 grand for the wealthiest, compared to just 240 grand for the poorest. And this money's, traditionally used to
get a deposit. I mean, there's virtually no other way to get on the housing ladder, is there? If you don't have some sort of wealthy benefactor, and obviously your parents are the first port of call, I can't imagine how anyone else gets a deposit now. How can you possibly save up? What would it be, like 30 grand or something to save? You'd need to save up to
virtually impossible. This sentence is so ridiculous. While these transfers are important assistance for some, they are very unequally spread. And it's the Guardian trying to solve life. Basically, I'm currently working 2 jobs, well into my 20s, working myself into the ground, trying to get a mortgage or die trying. And that's just like some posh show gets it handed to him, but that's called life. All the attempts to fix it have led to mass murder. It's called communism. So it's like the Guardian just sort of trying to...
It's the quest for cosmic justice. Yeah. They will never let it go.
Nick goes to a petrol station.
I think Nick is in line to pick up a sugar daddy off this show at some point. Health news now in the Guardian. And in the cost of living crisis, pharmacists are struggling to compete with Netflix, avocados and mortgages as well, Nick.
Yeah, so patients in England not collecting NHS prescriptions because of cost. And it's a pretty unfortunate story. They're saying, look, is there anything I can do without? They're really saying, which is the bit of the pill which pills do I really need? Which ones are just which ones that keep me alive? I don't need any quality of life. So, it's pretty horrible. And you go, well, it's just more broken Britain, except it's not. It's broken England, because Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland get prescriptions free.
Well, the thing with this doesn't have to be an either-or thing. It doesn't need to be quite so binary. I mean, I have a couple of things now on prescription, and what I was interested to see was the regularity, right? So some of them... you can basically, you pay £9.50, right, for your prescription. But it's up to the doctor whether that's for a week's worth or a month's worth or 2 months' worth. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
It's quite easy for them to sort of go, your prescription will get you 1 ampule or 15 pills, whatever. See what I mean? So, I get an ampule,
You've got to have a good relationship with your doctor, kind of go to his house occasionally for dinner and sort of... Well, then he gives you the month's worth for the week's worth.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. You have to butter them up nicely, But if you get grumpy when they take your blood pressure, then they have the opportunity to. So that's part of what that scrawl is. It's not a simple, If you had to get a prescription every single week, £9.50, and you were on a meagre income, I can imagine why that might be something you look at and think.
Always be nice to the guy that checks your prostate. Is my tip.
But then, if you pay extra, he'll go a bit deeper. But I think if you're on benefits, then you get free prescriptions. Yeah, this is just, it's just something that, the middle class gets...
Well, it's obviously
just... people get hammered with. But, I mean, the cost of prescriptions, sometimes things that are on prescription are cheaper to buy if they're out of patent or whatever. You can just buy them as generics over the counter. But for a lot of drugs, you're getting a massive saving, and people in the USA would love to pay £9.50 for a month's worth of, whatever medication it is.
It's absolutely true. We have no idea just how great prescription charges are generally speaking. But of course, this is a guy speaking on behalf of some kind of collective of pharmacists, isn't he? Everyone at the moment is making their pitch for, come on, give us a bit more money out of the ever-scraped pot. The Express now. And it sounds like the Tories' deadly secret weapon has struck again, Leo.
So Nicola Sturgeon has been hit by a new nightmare as support for Scottish independence and the SNP plummets. So they did a poll and it's flipped. So I think last year there was a poll that said it was around 55% in favour of independence.
Yeah.
Now this new poll, 56% in favour of remaining in the UK and only 44% in favour of independence, which is incredible. And the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, she's insisted that she'll use next year's UK general election as a de facto Scottish independence referendum. But this poll suggests that there's very little support for that. She always says this about general elections. If we win this, which they always do because I don't know why, but if we win this, then that means we should have a referendum. That means the people of Scotland want to leave the UK. It doesn't. People have just said they don't want to leave. But people are really worried. You'd think it would just be the trans stuff. Obviously, Nicola Sturgeon with her gender ideology has completely alienated so many women and just, shown that she's taken Scotland down a dark path with no rights for women. But what's worrying people the most seems to be concerns over Scotland's economy. In an independent Scotland, and more than half
fundamental then,
more than half think food prices would increase and the standard of living would go down. People just want to feed their kids.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? It begins to look like independence is actually a luxury belief rather than a sort of fundamental one. I would love to get your opinion, Nick, but we're running a bit late. We're going to go to the second and third half. But come back in a couple of minutes. We've got tax overhaul, which could affect British comedy. How the French can't stand the woke. That's good news. Train shaming in Spain. And many more besides. Stay tuned. See you in a couple of minutes.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions. I have no time for cultural totalitarianism. We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Welcome back to Headliners. So the Times now on a potential threat to British comedy, or at least the kind of British comedy that has a budget for cafe latte runs.
Yes, the last thing British comedy needs. So this is about the tax overhaul. So the producers of The Office are saying that can never get made now because there's this new thing where producers can claim tax relief beyond $1 million per hour, but then it's going to go up potentially to $1.5 million. And they're saying that would make it almost impossible to make shows like The Office. And so that...
So you don't get tax relief until you've spent $1.5 million? Is
yes,
that the idea?
instead of $1 million.
Per hour.
Wow.
So that apparently would make it very hard. I don't know all about the budget of the BBC and things, but apparently that would make it very hard. They're calling it would have a scorched earth effect on British comedy. And, of course, the other thing that would have a scorched earth effect on British comedy is the fact that it's woke and rubbish and awful now.
Well, it's quite interesting that the people who have complained about this, I mean, this might just reflect who the Times have on their kind of speed dial, but the Asher Taller, who was a producer on The Office, I don't think was the producer, but anyway, let's put that to one side. The Office was 20 years ago now, and I don't think he's, you know, he hasn't got credits that are going to impress people in the same way in this story. He may have made other shows, but if he has, you know, obviously the Times haven't felt that it would work. The other one is Jimmy Mulville, co-founder of Hat Trick. I mean, their two famous shows were Have I Got News for You and Whose Line Is It Anyway? Yeah. That's like 30 years ago. They're basically getting people to complain about a change in protocols, but none of these people have made anything worth watching for decades.
Yeah, and the rich guys. Why are we like this? This is basically taxpayers' money they're not being taxed. They're getting a tax dodge. Why don't we like lift taxes on cleaners or people who could do more money, more with that money? Why are we giving tax breaks to rich people?
I think Dominic Frisby, who occasionally contributed to this channel, was. Made a very good show, an Edinburgh show about this, talking about the sort of free market in comedy and how the BBC is kind of finding itself in a very difficult situation now because people can make content and put it straight onto YouTube and what have you. And, of course, they're not looking for £1 million, you know, per hour. They're just creating comedy out of, you know, in the shed in the garden again.
But given that we're paying for Angela Rayner's iPad, I wouldn't mind paying for another Office. If we could have a seminal work of genius like The Office again, that's something I would actually pay for. But it won't happen for any number of reasons that are... because comedy's over.
Well, it's moved on into different formats. Anyway, the Daily Mail now. This sounds quite comical. It does sound like the perfect and just response to woke activists, in my view.
Yeah, so a Virginia lawyer has demanded that the University of Richmond, this is Richmond in America, pay his family $3.6 billion after the school removed the name of his ancestor from its law school because he was a slave owner. You might think this is one of these spurious legal attacks for a ridiculous amount of money, but actually all he's doing is so that his ancestor gave the school a lot of money
in those days.
And so he's just asking that the school, since they've removed his name from it and they're saying he's a terrible person, pay the money back. Pay back the donation that was made in 1890, adjusted for inflation, plus interest.
Yeah, so, I think it's a very reasonable anchor sum, at least. I mean, I'm sure they'd negotiate from that. But this is exactly right. It's like the Rhodes Scholarship, right? And they still have Cecil Rhodes, a little statue outside the building. Yeah. Well, if you don't want him to have him there, then pay it all back.
Yeah, exactly.
Back, you know?
And there's no evidence of this guy owning slaves in the first place. It seems very shaky. They should go and get funding from Ben & Jerry's.
It's the new reparations list. It's so good. Yeah. The other thing is he's a lawyer. They didn't think it through going at a lawyer, did they? Now he's suing them for $3.6 billion. I love this. If this works, wokeness will end immediately. Can you imagine the other universities? They're like, slavery was good. Yeah. They just all absolutely brick it.
They're all putting in Brighton road signs back up in Liverpool. Nick, I think piece in The Telegraph that somewhat distressingly suggests the French have got the right idea after all, not us.
Yeah, so the French apparently can't stand woke. So it's an interesting piece in The Telegraph from Melissa Twigg, I believe, about... She asked people like a French PR manager she knows and various other people, and they said they didn't seem to have a problem with having relationships in the office with younger people and things like this, and they didn't have pronouns. They're basically... And someone here says well, they're 10 years behind. They're still making fun of foreign accents on television. I'm like, that's more like 40 years or 50
hello,
or something.
hello. I bet they don't know. What was it? It was called Hello, Hello, wasn't it? The one about the French resistance?
Yeah.
Do you think they have that?
Yeah, good point.
The British, yeah.
This is a strange thing about the French. They're less. It's this less of the sort of Protestant. We have a great Protestant work ethic. We have the sort of stuffiness. They have the more continental, and they have the sort of nationalism still and the resistance. You know, they have some American culture, but they've got obviously a different language and a resistance to some of the excesses of.
This is it, because they have their own racial tensions. Of course, they have all the history with Algeria and so on. They have the they call the banlieue, these sort of like the housing projects on there. They have it all, but they don't try and import America's racial problems. They don't try and import America's student politics. They just have their own problems, and then they also have their own kind of shrugging.
Yeah,
you
and
know.
it's interesting, this sort of national pride that, you know, you still get in France is seen as such a disgusting thing in the UK. To have any pride in Britain, even though it's obviously the best country, it's disgusting. When you look at our rock music compared to French rock music.
It's extraordinary, isn't it, how they manage to sustain pride? But they do. They have an extraordinary amount of confidence in their culture.
What's confusing to me is they have all these like lefty, postmodern French thinkers, don't they? All the sort of bourgeois.
And that they export to America, and they ruin it. None of them give a damn about them. Michel Foucault. Anyway, Leo, the Express now, appropriately, it's a railway story in the Express, and it sounds like Spain are being train shamed.
Yeah, they say here it's an unspeakable botch. So Spanish taxpayers will see a long-time needed railway project delayed after it was discovered that new trains were designed to be too big to go through some of the country's train tunnels.
That's fantastic.
And it's going to cost Spain £230 million. I mean, is Spain run by the SNP? This is ridiculous. Basically, in June 2020, this Spanish railway giant Renfe commissioned 31 trains with dimensions that have been discovered. They just don't fit through the holes.
Won't go through the holes. I do remember, I haven't done much rail travel in Spain, but I did see a friend off once, and I couldn't believe the size of the train when it pulled in. They have they're like these American ones, double-deckers, really, really wide, like houses, you know, like when you're going along the motorway sometimes and you see a wide load up ahead.
Yeah.
So they obviously have some sort of culture and tradition of that, anyway.
I thought you meant you killed him when you said you saw your friend off.
See him off, just quick shove under the...
This is a feel-good story. I mean, you think that England and Britain we're the only ones in trouble. I read a story the other day, 40% of German trains are late. I was like, amazing, it's not just us, the whole of the West is collapsing.
Yeah.
So it's one of those feel-good moments.
You know what happens when the trains are late in Germany, though? That's worrying. The Daily Mail have news of a poorly faked snuff movie at the Super Bowl and a feud brewing between rival self-driving software barons, Nick.
Yes, more transport news. So the Tesla ad Elon didn't want you to see. So Musk's nemesis, which is Dan O'Dowd, has made this advert basically claiming Teslas are awful. And I think self-driving Teslas, I think we can see a video of it, I believe.
They got a video?
Or just me, that'd be fine.
Keep talking.
Full self-driving will run down a child in a school crosswalk.
Whoa,
swerve into oncoming traffic, hit a baby in a stroller, go straight past stopped school buses, ignore do not enter signs, and even drive on the wrong side of the road. Tesla's full self-driving is endangering the public with deceptive marketing and woefully inept engineering. 90% agree that this should be banned immediately. Why does NHTSA allow Tesla full self-driving?
Knocked his head clean off.
I mean, that last dummy was asking for it when he skied right into.
You should never ski across a road like that.
But just for more context, this is Dan O'Dowd, who's got a bee in his bonnet about Elon Musk. He's been doing this for a while, and back in August, Musk sent a cease and desist letter. He did not desist. He did an advert at the Super Bowl. He didn't cease or desist. He, if anything, stepped it up a notch. And Musk replied in emojis at one point, calling him bat something crazy. But because he said that Musk is just, these will just mow down kids indiscriminately. Yeah. And Musk is saying, no, we had some beta problems, but we don't do that. But yeah, I guess the only guy that's going to do this to Elon Musk is someone incredibly rich, which he is.
Well, with rival software. That was what I was thinking. Was he just some guy, like some lefty who doesn't think children should be killed? But it turns out he wants people to kill them with his cars instead.
But yeah, I think there's some issues with this stuff. I think people have become too complacent. They'll forget how to drive. Because my father-in-law, he's got a car that does all the keeps you in your lane and all that kind of stuff. And then he had to drive my mother-in-law's car. he could hardly do it. It was,
Yeah,
you had to really
it
learn
is
how
weird
to
though.
do it.
My car, I didn't realise I'd bought one like that. I bought a second-hand BMW, and it has that. If you get into traffic, it will automatically start slowing down, and it's kind of annoying. You want to overrule it, going, "Come on, we can get through there," and it's anyway. Listen, that's part 3 done. Stay tuned. We will talk about stone dogs, a bitter director taking revenge over a negative review, and how your personality is not in fact set in stone. See you in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pearce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
And welcome back to the final part of Headliners. Leo, kick us off, please, with the Telegraph. This is... well, it initially sounds like fun, but maybe dogs don't actually enjoy being stoned. It's hard to tell, isn't it?
Well, did you do any studies when you were a student? Did you put a crash helmet over a...
We didn't ever have a dog when I was a student, which I do think is a shame, because student households would all be improved by a dog.
Yeah.
But very few of them can, organise themselves to...
The dog wouldn't survive, would it?
Yeah.
Wouldn't last 5 minutes.
We had a cat a couple of times.
Right. Well, there's been a huge rise in stoned dogs after New York legalised cannabis. So they're eating cannabis that's discarded on the streets of New York, according to veterinarians. The dogs are displaying an array of symptoms from loss of balance to difficulty walking, nausea, and in some cases, listening to Pink Floyd and believing conspiracy theories. They often vomit and drool and their pupils will be dilated. And they're getting this for free. This is terrible. But yeah, cannabis is now legal in 21 states. So
my big question is, how can you tell if a dog is stoned? Because it's hunger, lethargy, staring into the middle distance for no reason.
My mother-in-law has a dog. She's getting quite old now, and she's convinced it's got dementia. And I'm like, it was always a bit mental, this dog, really. I just don't know what seemed to like, oh, it's left a pot on the stove, you know.
These are kind of side effects we don't think of, innit? We do this thing, we make cannabis legal, which we should never do, and suddenly dogs are suffering. You see, think about the dogs, Leo.
Yeah, I feel sorry for the dog. And it's interesting you had to say veterinarians, of course, because if you talk about vets in America, it means something else, doesn't it? And they're more likely to be stoned, in fact.
And they smoked a lot of them in Vietnam, so
it's going in circles.
It would link. But I mean, I'm more worried about children because they're making cannabis into gummies and all kinds of things that are basically sweets.
And as we know, it's much, much more powerful than it was in our day. Not that I ever touched it, but when you used to have to sort of crumble up red lead like a bit of oxo into a joint, then it was a very mildly mood-altering thing. Whereas now it transports you into another dimension.
And it's extra powerful for dogs.
Yeah. Well, they do have. That's right. They have lots of receptors, which does suggest that God wants them to be stoned. I suppose God stoned is actually maybe a good crossword clue for dog, isn't it? Mixed up God. Anyway, Nick, Telegraph now, a German choreographer has reacted to criticism in a way that any comic will surely empathise with.
Yes, staying on the dog theme, director smears dog feces into critics' face after she says audiences would die of boredom at his piece. Now, I mean, as you said there, Simon, I mean, as comics, we've all been criticised horribly. Yeah. I wrote a scathing takedown of Chortle the other day because after that Samantha Presti thing, and I thought I felt so good because I'm basically out of the comedy industry.
Persona non grata anyway.
Yeah, because I'm in this sort of commentary world now. I was like, I can say what I want about Chortle. I absolutely laid into him, and it's the best I felt possibly ever. And it was. And I thought
they've always been very good to me, I have to say.
Well, yeah, so there you are. See, that's what every comedian has to do. Whereas I can call them low IQ, typo-ridden screeds, and it felt amazing. Amazing. But this is ballet director Marco Gucke, who was accosted by critic Rebecca Huster. No idea, the names are a bit tricky. But
very complex.
But she basically said that your show is boring. So he happened to have some feces in his pocket from his dog. And she said it was premeditated, but he did.
It was in his pocket.
He did pick it up from his dog. He has a dog, right?
I think that's the thing. He has a Dachshund, doesn't he?
Yes, and he had a full bag of dog excrement because he picked it up. But he happened to, and she thinks it's premeditated. I think he just got really angry. Well, that bit's clear. And just swashed it into her face. Yeah. And she didn't like this.
Sorted through his pockets to see what he could smash into her face. Oh, no, I can't. Oh, wow.
And then she went to the police, and you know, the rest is history. But yeah, of course, everyone's wanted to do that. And I watched the piece you sent, and it was sort of, it's actually quite a good dance.
It was
had a Patti Smith song.
But the funny thing was, it was called Thin Skin, which I thought was kind of ironic. But it was 3 years ago. Yeah, it was a lot of very jerky, sort of mechanical dancing to an old classic, Patti Smith track, which I think is pretty based.
I'm not condoning this, but critics are awful.
Yeah, and I can't believe we still have them. They're completely obsolete. Why would you need to know what a critic thinks when you can just go and watch stuff on YouTube or browse?
I remember a brilliant, the very first time I saw Dylan Moran in Edinburgh, about, must be 20 years ago at least, and he said, the word critic puts me in mind of an insect that eats its own young. It's a very memorable description. The Daily Mail opinion piece now that sounds perilously close to an old Dougie Dunlop routine I used to greatly enjoy. I don't remember that one here.
A woman has sparked an online debate after claiming that men are only really nice until they're 25 years old. And she says that now that she's in her 40s, she has noticed that her male peers are grumpier and not as nice to her. Because they're not trying to have sex with you anymore.
It's very, very straightforward, isn't it?
And men tend to be single up until they're 25, so they're trying.
Yeah.
And then, by the time they hit their 40s, not only are they not trying to have sex, but they've been worn down by women and don't want to engage with them anymore.
People do genuinely try and present their best version of themselves. And they're between 17 and 25, they're hoping to date. They're absolutely kind of being powered entirely by testosterone.
Yeah.
And they're just being driven to mate, and they've learned various kind of modes which they think will, improve their chances. By the time they're 40, they're done with all that. They can't be bothered anymore.
Firstly, this comes from Mumsnet, so obviously. But, there's a real self-betraying line here. So the woman admits she's in her 40s and then said, is there something wrong with me that I don't seem to be seeing men in the same way anymore? It's like, yes, like you say, they're not seeing you in the same way. You're not 25. It's called DiCaprio's Law. Everyone knows.
Well, the very sad thing, and this is hateful, I might get taken off air entirely for this. It's going to be get taken off.
Go for it. I can host.
But the reality is, I think, about men's attraction to women in terms of sexual attraction, it is very much about fertility. There is a point at which a woman can be objectively still beautiful. You go, absolutely, you've kept yourself amazingly, but I'm more sexually attracted to this really quite ordinary-looking woman in her mid-20s because it's like it's happening below the radar, isn't it?
Yeah.
You're getting a message. It's a part of you that you're not in control of that's going, yeah, but she will give you babies and this one won't, you know.
Yeah.
And of course you might still go, I would rather spend the evening with a woman in her 40s who has cultivated herself and developed, a witty repartee and a knowledge of German theatre. And
maybe you can work out some sort of arrangement.
Yeah. Anyway. So, finally, Leo, the Daily Mail and a pretty blatant demonstration of the wrath of God.
Yeah, so it's the incredible moment. A huge bolt of lightning struck the Christ the Redeemer statue in Brazil, which is 125 feet tall. And there's a photo of it. I don't know if we've got the photo, but it looks amazing.
Yeah.
So this big, there it is. I mean, it really looks like something that was made, in a PlayStation 1 game. But that's an actual photo taken by somebody, and it's the third time in 15 years it's been hit by lightning.
I mean, I find that's extraordinarily rare, actually, because it's obviously high and it's obviously, it's built like a lightning conductor. I would have thought that would be getting hit all the time.
And it's quite a stormy area.
Yeah.
It's amazing. When you look at it, it's an amazing image. You tend to think, is the world ending? Is Jesus coming back? And it's much like Jim Caviezel when he played Jesus in Mel Gibson's film. He got struck by lightning. And you go, is this a sign from God? Or, like you say, our cross is just incredible lightning conductors.
Yeah,
and I'm torn.
I think it may be that.
Struck by lightning during the filming of...
Yeah, and it could have been God saying, should you be playing Jesus, mate? Or it could have been him testing him and saying...
But then Michael Jackson was struck by lighting, not lightning, but lighting,
in a Pepsi
when it fell off his head, and his head burst into flames. It was a similar effect.
And he was struck by lightning. Is it skin lightened?
That's true as well.
Caviezel had lifelong heart problems after playing Jesus. So, he had lifelong heart problems after playing Jesus.
And his moonwalk
really
was a little bit like coming back from the dead.
Are you saying he's like Jesus, though? I think that's sort of blasphemous, what you're saying.
Yeah. I always remember Christ the Redeemer statue because it was always the best prize you could win on Sale of the Century. And they would go over there on the holiday in Brazil to Rio. Anyway, that's all the stories for today. But let's have another quick look at Tuesday's front pages to wrap up. The Daily Mail, Rishi, RAF are ready to shoot down spy balloons. The Telegraph, police use of Chinese drones risks UK security. The Times have exposed the secret plot to sink tougher sewage rules. The Guardian have police missed chance to arrest Cousins as sex offender suspect on multiple occasions. Disgraceful story. The Daily Star say we can't rule out aliens in this Chinese spy balloon business. That's all for tonight's show. Thanks to Leo Kearse and Nick Dixon. I'll be back with Headliners tomorrow at 11 with Josh Howie and Francis Foster, a slightly more left-leaning panel. Remember, if you're watching the 5 a.m. repeat, stay tuned for The Breakfast Show after the break.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview channel 236.
And YouView channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
Tonight on Farage, a community protest in Knowsley on Merseyside turned violent on Friday night, leaving people being labelled as far right. Are the people of that part of Liverpool really far right? We'll talk about that. A Brexiteers summit? No, a Rejoiners summit. Michael Gove and Lord Mandelson working together to achieve what? I'm not sure. We'll talk about spy balloons being shot down, 4 of them, over the course of the weekend. And Brian Howsam joins me on Talking Pints. He's the CEO of Staysure, the big travel company. He's going to tell you how to become a successful entrepreneur. All of that after the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Nigel, thank you. It's 7 o'clock and the top stories on GB News tonight. Downing Street has refused to comment on spy balloons potentially being spotted all over the UK. The United States says it's not yet been able to identify recent objects found in North American airspace after shooting down a 4th object in just over a week. Rishi Sunak has said the country does have the military capability to keep the nation's skies safe.
We have something called the Quick Reaction Alert Force, which involves Typhoon planes, which are kept on 24/7 readiness to police our airspace, which is incredibly important. I can't obviously comment in detail on national security matters, but we're in constant touch with our allies. And as I said, we'll do whatever it takes to keep the country safe.
And the White House in America has been at pains to say there is no indication of extraterrestrial activity. It has said China has a high-altitude balloon program to gather intelligence.
We assessed whether they were sending any communication signals. We detected none. We looked to see whether they were maneuvering or had any propulsion capabilities. We saw no signs of that. We did, however, assess that their altitudes were considerably lower than the Chinese high-altitude balloon and did pose a threat to civilian commercial air traffic. And while we have no specific reason to suspect that they were conducting surveillance of any kind, we couldn't rule that out.
Now, rescuers in southern Turkey have saved several children today, a full week after devastating earthquakes shook the region. A 13-year-old boy and a 10-year-old girl were among those pulled out alive from the rubble of collapsed buildings, having been buried for more than 180 hours. The number of people that have died in both Turkey and Syria has now risen to 37,000. As officials say, the window of finding any remaining survivors is closing. An appeal here by the UK's Disasters Emergency Committee has so far raised more than £60 million. NATO has said a new Russian offensive in Ukraine has already begun. Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg said today he sees no signs of Russia preparing for peace, as Moscow has been sending in yet more troops and weapons. He believes Ukraine now needs fighter jets and long-range missiles to counter any new attack and to recapture lost territory. And lastly, Buckingham Palace has said this afternoon the Queen Consort has tested positive for COVID after suffering from what she thought were just cold symptoms. GB News understands Camilla remains in good spirits and is resting up, but is said to be disappointed she's unable to make this week's engagements across the country. Camilla was forced to postpone a visit to the West Midlands earlier on today. You're up to date on TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News, the People's Channel, where now it's time for Farage.
Good evening. Well, the scene was Knowsley on Merseyside. It was Friday evening, and what happened there had been bubbling away for months, and it was to do with young men in a migrant hotel. Parents of a school, a girls' school, just down the road, becoming increasingly concerned. Now, of course, mainstream media will tell you there is no hard evidence, but a strong belief in that community that young men who are living in that hotel were talking to girls, often underage girls, and a video emerged, and that seemed to light the blue touch paper as far as the community was concerned. They announced they'd be holding a protest, which led to a counter-protest from Care for Calais. And then something extraordinary and really rather horrible happened. Some young men turned up, dressed in black, with backpacks, carrying sledgehammers and fireworks, and they proceeded to smash in the front windows of a police van. That led to condemnation from right across the political spectrum. Foreign Office Minister Andrew Mitchell said the violence was completely unacceptable. Well, we agree with that, Mr. Mitchell. He said, we have a duty to look after these people. Well, yes, but equally, they have a duty to behave. Lisa Nandy, Shadow Levelling Up Secretary, said all of this was a result of a toxic mix of the anti-migrant rhetoric coming from the government. And Claire Mosley, the founder of the so-called refugee charity Care for Calais, said she was worried about the poor men in the hotel and she was trying to get in touch with them. Well, Claire, I'd have thought you've got all their phone numbers already. After all, Care for Calais meet people in the camps in Dunkirk, give them advice how to cross the English Channel, and then often meet them on the beaches in Kent with food parcels and all else. I wouldn't have thought you were short, particularly of phone numbers. Tim Nor-Hilton of Refugee Action talked about people, a baying mob who are the far right, whether you want to be called it or not. And local MP Sir George Howarth said those demonstrating against refugees at the protest tonight do not represent this community. Well, Mr. Howarth, I've got news for you. They really do represent that community. What I don't know is who those young men in those black uniforms were. I have no idea who they were. Were they far right? Could they have been Antifa? I simply can't answer that question, but I'm pleased to say that in the last hour, Merseyside police have confirmed that it was initially a peaceful protest and then some people arrived and it turned violent. But let me ask you, you at home, do you think the people of Knowsley should be called far right? Let me know your thoughts, farage@gbnews.uk. Nobody has been speaking up on behalf of that community. It simply hasn't been allowed. And when you approach members of that community in Knowsley and ask them to speak, they're generally just too terrified to do so. They're worried, I guess, that they show their face and the national media will be knocking on the door the next day, going through every Facebook post they've ever made and perhaps making their life a misery. I also think that much of the rhetoric that we've had from Sky News, the BBC, mainstream politicians, is to say, don't any of you ever dare protest about migrant hotels or you'll be classed as far right too. And we've seen very similar tactics to do with the protests in Ireland. My fear, my genuine fear, is that we're only at the beginning of this process. I'm hoping and praying that all these young men, those that have thrown their passports into the English Channel, that are coming into this country, my prayer is we do not become like Malmö and Stockholm in Sweden. Well, joining me down the line, Merseyside freelance journalist Justin Dunn. Justin, good evening and thank you for joining me.
Hi, Nigel.
Justin, tell me something. When I think of Knowsley, I think of one of the safest Labour seats in the country, a place that has voted Labour. I mean, is Knowsley a hotbed of the far right? Please help.
The idea of finding almost anybody who is far right in Knowsley, or indeed Merseyside as a whole, is like trying to find white dog poo in the North Pole. It isn't going to happen. It doesn't exist. These are genuinely concerned mums and dads and uncles and aunties. And as always, because it's in Liverpool, Liverpool gets the kicking.
Yes, I think there is something to that. Liverpool does always attract, it seems, negative national media headlines. But tell me something. Have we any idea who these really dangerous people were that turned up with the sledgehammers? Who the hell were they?
In all honesty, Nigel, I couldn't tell you. I've spoken to, as you know, quite a few people over the weekend. We know there are always lunatics and fools who turn up to these things. It's sadly what happens, but we know this from protests around the country, never mind here. You'll always get idiots. But this was started out as a peaceful protest, as you pointed out earlier, to say that we're not happy. These were mums and dads who had gone to the council. They'd gone to the police. They complained to all the people they're meant to be able to complain to, and no one listened. So when they advertised that they were going to have their own protest, obviously the counter-protest got organised, and then we saw what happened on Friday night. I don't know who the sledgehammer people are, but I can very much vouch that they were nothing to do with the people who actually organised the protest in the first place.
And Justin, as a freelance journalist, the northwest of the country has seen a higher proportion of migrant hotels than any other part of the UK. And it's been going on now for the last 3 years.
Yeah.
Do you believe there genuinely is evidence that makes these parents, uncles and aunties concerned? Does the evidence exist?
Well, I can honestly not answer that question properly, Nigel, because I don't have the information at my fingertips, and it'd be wrong to do otherwise. However, what is interesting is that why is it always these poor communities that these people are sent to, and never the rich ones? I don't see any hostels opening in Kensington or Islington or Highbury or Highgate or whatever. I'm sure there are some in the south of England, but they tend to be in poor communities. And we just get dumped.
That's a very, very fair point.
And if we dare to say anything, and you and I have previous on this, which we should say, when it happened in Hoylake previously, is that if you dare to say anything, then you're a racist or you're a bigot or you're whatever.
I know.
These people are not far right.
Shocking.
These are dyed-in-the-wool Labour voters, Nigel. Dyed-in-the-wool Labour voters.
And actually, Justin, thank you. And I've got one of them on the line right now. I've got Ged on the line now from Knowsley. Ged, they're saying terrible things about your community. Why do you have a problem, is the question. Why do you have a problem with that migrant hotel and the young men in it?
Well, first of all, we're not racist. Never have been. Liverpool for years has welcomed refugees, which everyone knows that. Most Scousers, immigrants anyway, were Irish. So the reason this has all come to a fore, and just happened with that one video. It's been going on for months, where they've been in coming from that hotel, going into local skate park, and trying to entice young girls with ale, different stuff. I don't live in those. I'm in Croxteth, but we're part of there. That night, the people that turned up were people, they were mums, dads, granddads, grandmothers, sisters, brothers. They were just there to say, we want people to listen to us and people to come onto the estate and start stopping this. Because it's going on, no one seems to be stopping it. They're all saying, yeah, we'll check it out, we'll do that. And, you know, why doesn't that care for Calais go and speak to the people? She's saying that our kids are vulnerable. We're all here for our kids. We all want our kids to be safe. We're vulnerable, our kids. Our kids can't go to school without getting enticed. There's a school in Knowsley Village. They've had to actually put netting up because the immigrants were standing looking through the fence at the kids. And that's a fact. Now,
wow.
All we want safety for our kids. And as you said, I've seen no women in that hotel. I live not far from that hotel. I've seen no women. I've seen loads of young men. They were playing football on the local pitch. There's like 40 of them on the local pitch playing football. I haven't seen no women.
Ged, I have to say, I have to say, you know, the general point that Liverpool has been one of the most welcoming places over the centuries is absolutely right. And yet, Ged, when I talk to members of your community over the last couple of days, people are scared to speak out, aren't they?
They're frightened because everyone seems to be for the other. If you say anything, you're petrified because the news will jump on you. That's why people are frightened to speak, because they think the news will jump on you and make something out of it. But I don't care. Our city, we're worried about our kids. Not the Liverpool city centre's full as well. My niece goes into town. First thing I do, get your phone me. There's that many of them in the city centre as well. It's not just in the outskirts. But one thing I'll say, Knowsley is not racist. And that demonstration was not racist. It was not racist. It was about safety for our kids.
Ged, I have to say thank you for coming on and speaking up on behalf of that community. And I hope everybody hears that message articulate, loud and clear. Thank you for joining me down the line. Well, there we are. You tell me, viewers and listeners, do you think the people of Knowsley are far right? I don't think they are for one moment. In a second, we'll analyse why Michael Gove chose to meet with David Lammy, Peter Mandelson and many others to discuss the failings of Brexit and how we can get a closer relationship with the European Union. Is the biggest sellout in history about to begin?
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
Is the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on
Absolutely.
Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway,
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, your voices are in and you're pretty clear in your thoughts about whether the people of Knowsley should be called far right. Paula says, no, they aren't. They just care about their children's safety like I do. And when you listen to Ged just before the break, he was on with me down the line, I mean, there was real passion and genuine concern I felt in that voice. One says to me, no, maybe some of them are. Who knows? But I'm sure the vast majority were concerned citizens. And in similar vein, Carl says, some will be clearly, many will be normal people sick of the policy of housing economic migrants without local agreement. Carl, that is right. And it's also worth saying that the Northwest has borne the biggest brunt of this of any part of the country. And you can go right across Merseyside. I've been to Hoylake. I mean, right next to the exclusive Open Championship golf course. That hotel's full up. And Ged again said in his testimony, there are hotels right across Liverpool that are full. And that leads to a lot of young men aimlessly wandering around. And frankly, no good can come of that. I've also made the point before, and I've been shouted down for it, but I'll make it again, that many of these young men come from countries in which women aren't even second-class citizens. They have completely different social attitudes towards women, completely different levels of tolerance towards homosexuality and everything else. And we are storing up for ourselves just the most enormous social problems. Now, I thought in 2016, one of the reasons to vote Brexit was we'd actually get back control of our borders. That simply has not been the case, as the number coming illegally across the Channel rockets, and the numbers coming legally under this government have hit an all-time record. But that wasn't the reason. That wasn't the reason for the big meeting at Ditchley in Oxfordshire, which took place on Thursday and Friday of last week. It was chaired by Lord Mandelson. It was attended by David Lammy. John Healey, Shadow Defence Secretary, was there. Oh, and of course, GlaxoSmithKline were there. And yes, you've guessed it, Goldman Sachs. Goldman Sachs had to be there. I mean, these were the chief globalist Remainers. They're now rejoiners. But what the hell was Michael Gove and a couple of other senior retired Conservatives, what in God's name were they doing there? What we've been told is they were trying to deal with the economic failings of Brexit, the need to get back into a closer relationship with the European Union. And then I thought quite chillingly, they also discussed defence integration and whether we should have a common policy towards China. Well, Ben Habib, London-based property businessman, former Brexit Party MEP, joins me. What on earth is Michael Gove up to? Do you have any idea?
Well, I don't think Michael Gove is a Brexiteer, Nigel. I know he campaigned for Brexit, but
The balloon went up for me back in 2017 when he said that we can't leave the EU without a deal. And if you believe the United Kingdom should be an independent sovereign nation, you then don't seek a deal. You should be prepared to leave without a deal. Of course, a deal on the right terms is worth having. But if that is the be-all and end-all of leaving, you're not really a leaver.
And if you announce during a negotiation
that you must have a deal, you undermine your negotiating position completely. It's one of the first things I said when I joined the Brexit Party on the 12th of April 2019, that the minute you announce that you're not prepared to leave without a deal, the counterparty, in this case the EU, knows it's got you by the short and curlies.
Yeah.
And that's precisely what's happened, Nigel.
Yeah, but then, Ben, you're a successful businessman, so you shouldn't be commenting on things like this. But it does seem to me that we had people negotiating a deal that had never, ever done a day's work in the private sector or put deals together.
Yeah, never. And clearly incompetent. You know, we had... What triggered me, I was a mild Eurosceptic, but what triggered me was Osborne saying that we'd have a massive recession if we voted to leave. Carney saying that he had to put £250 billion aside to save the banks in the event we voted to leave. Of course, none of those predictions came true. We were absolutely fine.
No, but the British economy is flatlining. We have business confidence at the lowest levels I've known for literally for decades, the beginning of a brain drain, and a lot of think tanks suggesting that we're losing several percentage points of our GDP every year as a direct result of Brexit.
Well, it's completely wrong.
And that was what brought this summit together at Ditchley.
But it's completely wrong. They're conflating issues and they're attributing to Brexit failed Conservative Party policy for 13 years. The whole point about Brexit was to create an independent, nimble, trading nation that is the UK, putting British national interests first and unhooking ourselves from the EU. What we've got is a highly bureaucratic, highly regulated, highly taxed, interfering state that's bigger than ever. Civil service is completely out of control. The interference in public services is completely out of control. The interference in business is out of control. This government can't help itself but interfere in the private sector. And it views the private sector with antipathy. As we came out of 2 years of lockdown, Nigel, instead of taking the pressure off the private sector by cutting business rates, for example, or cutting corporation tax.
They're putting it up.
They're putting it up. And we saw last week AstraZeneca is not going to set up in the United Kingdom. It's going to set up in Ireland, where the corporation tax rate is 12.5%.
And that's got nothing to do with Brexit whatsoever.
Nothing to do with Brexit. And the other big elephant in the room, of course, is lockdowns, which decimated the UK economy, broke the labour markets, added 33% to our national debt in 2 years. Rishi Sunak, who talks about the need not to pass debt on to the next generation, added more debt to this country's balance sheet than any chancellor in history.
But Ben Habib, the problem is you were a late convert to this belief that we should break free of the European Union. I was doing it for getting on for 3 decades. Our problem is there is a general sense of disappointment in the country about Brexit. How can it be turned around?
But the issue here, Nigel, is not that Brexit has failed. It's that they've failed to deliver Brexit. As you know, myself and a number of other unionists brought a case against the government last week, which was adjudicated last week by the Supreme Court over the Northern Ireland Protocol. Why did we bring that case? Because the Northern Ireland Protocol basically condemned Northern Ireland to being in the EU single market for goods. We knew that was not the United Kingdom leaving as one United Kingdom. That's what Boris Johnson promised. He promised the country would leave the EU as one United Kingdom. When we voted on that bit of paper, it said, do you wish the United Kingdom to leave the EU, not Great Britain? And the Northern Ireland Protocol is not just important to Northern Ireland, it's very important to British citizens in Great Britain.
I mean, this was one of the biggest lies of all. Ben, final thought on all of this. There are many that will say, given what's happening in Ukraine right at the moment, given worries over Taiwan, that actually what was discussed at Ditchley makes sense, that maybe we should have closer military cooperation with the EU. That's an argument we're hearing more of.
I mean, the one thing that should be self-evident to anyone out of Ukraine is that we must never be allied to the EU over foreign policy. the EU tried to undermine our position on Iraq. It tried to undermine sanctions on Iran. It takes a friendly attitude to China when China needs to be challenged. It was sidling up to Ukraine, poking the bear, if you like, for years. And when it came to the fight, actually, Germany had hooked itself on an addiction of Russian fuel.
You couldn't invent it.
And I don't know if viewers know this, but Germany has bought 50 billion euros worth of Russian fuel since sanctions began. Germany is financing the Russian war effort. Thank goodness.
So we're better off, Ben.
Much better off out.
Mismanaging our own country,
well,
I
mean, we're very good at mismanaging. But what we've got to do, Nigel, is really Brexit properly. Take back control of our laws, our borders, our cash, our fish, get Northern Ireland back into the United Kingdom, and then chart a path that is for the British people. Not for the Europeans, not for the globalist agenda, but for us. That's what the people want.
Ben, the passion's still there. I'm pleased to see it, but it's certainly gone with Michael Gove. In a moment, what on earth is going on in the skies over North America? Could it be happening here? All of that in 2 minutes' time.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel. Well, a series of balloons or smaller objects being shot down over the course of the weekend. There's been a press conference over the course of the last hour. John Kirby from the US National Security Council has said China has a high-altitude balloon program that is linked to the army. In response, earlier on today, China claimed that the US has high-altitude balloons flying over their airspace, and it's happened 10 times in the last year, to which Kirby responded, there is no US surveillance or aircraft in Chinese airspace. Well, helping us to unpack some of this, or help us to try and unpack some of this, because it's quite tough to get our heads around, is Andrew Feinberg, White House correspondent with The Independent. Andrew, good afternoon. Your time. The first object that was shot down, as I understand it, was a big balloon. What was being shot down over the course of the weekend?
Well, we're not quite sure, and the White House isn't saying much. They're calling them objects, and what they have said is that they assessed that these objects pose threats to civil aviation because, unlike the Chinese balloon, these were at much lower altitudes and could interfere with civil aircraft, airliners, and such. So they were brought down. But the White House also has said that they assessed that these were not, as far as they can tell or are willing to say right now, engaged in espionage. They did not have the capability of moving on their own. They did not detect signals coming from them. But because they couldn't rule it out and they posed the threat to civil aviation, they were shot down.
And so these are genuinely unidentified flying objects. I'm sure some people are speculating about that.
Yes, but the White House also said today these were not extraterrestrials, so not aliens, which is probably a good thing because we've now shot down 3 of them, and if they were aliens, they might be a bit ticked off right now.
That's a very good point. Now, what about the counterclaim? You know, I mean, we've no idea. You know, we were told by some sources that these kind of balloons had flown over many continents, not just North America. But the counterclaim from China is that America is engaged in exactly the same kind of activity. It would be surprising, wouldn't it, Andrew, if America wasn't intelligence gathering in China in some way?
It would be, and I assume you're talking about the first balloon that was shot down off the coast of South Carolina last week. John Kirby said this morning that the U.S. does not have the sort of balloon surveillance program that has been described by U.S. officials as being operated by the Chinese. And that would track with a lot of what we know about U.S. intelligence capabilities. We do have a lot of satellites, which, for the most part, would negate the need for balloons.
Yeah. No, quite. Andrew, thanks for coming on and joining us. We'll wait and see as this mystery unfolds. And quite right, there are so many satellites up there. It's unbelievable. Time for a quick What the Farage moment. I have been saying for a very long time that unless we leave the European Convention on Human Rights, the ECHR, and its associated court in Strasbourg, unless we do that, we will not solve the migrant crisis. And that any attempt by government to put in new legislation is frankly fiddling around the edges. And I was really pleased to see this morning in the Daily Telegraph centre page, Nick Timothy, who of course was a very senior advisor to Theresa May, now writing a piece himself. Britain cannot protect its borders within the ECHR. We must leave it. I tell you what, this campaign is gaining momentum. It's splitting the Conservative Party right down the middle. It is almost like the Brexit battle revisited. But then, unless we do this, we haven't actually completed Brexit. That's my view. We'll debate much more of that over the coming months. In a moment, Ryan Howsam joins me. He is a big, successful entrepreneur, but he's had 1 or 2 ups and downs on the way to get there. The Stayshore Group, many of you perhaps have taken out travel insurance with him. He'll be with me for Talking Pints in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pearce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
Well, we'll see. It's time for Talking Pints, my favourite time of the day. Ryan Howsam is a Yorkshire entrepreneur. Welcome to the programme.
Thank you for having me.
Now, we're going to learn, Ryan, about various ups and downs of your life.
Quite a few downs.
And maybe we can learn some lessons from it. So, you're a council house boy from Sheffield. You don't like school very much.
Well, I got thrown out of A-levels, so it wasn't that bad.
You got kicked? Well, you got as far as A-levels?
Yeah, well, I wanted to be a golfer, and, you know, didn't really get down there really, but,
You wanted to be a golfer at that age?
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't quite good enough, but that would have been the big dream, yeah.
That would have been the big dream. And in the end, you decide to become a door-to-door salesman.
Yeah, well, I started knocking on doors, selling... Well, it was actually opening leads for salesmen to go in and sell, and then I'd go out and started closing glazing, and that was my start into sales. And then I learned everything from the like of Tom Hopkins and Zig Ziglar and all that type of stuff.
So door-to-door.
Yeah, the hard way. I was brought up the hard way.
Double glazing, and yet, within a few years, you're making quite a lot of money.
I made a lot of money and lost a lot of money, yeah.
What makes a good salesman?
The ability to listen, question, isolate, answer, confirm, close. That was what the mantra was as a kid.
Yeah. I know the mantra, but what makes a good salesman? What is that quality?
I think the ability to understand what the customer wants and then to guide them and let them think that they've made the decision to buy.
So you're not selling them stuff that they don't really need?
Well, I did at that point, yeah.
Well, that's at least honest.
Yeah.
But you decide that you want to become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, well, I mean, as soon as I saw, you know, that I could make money from the type of background that I was in, I mean, golf became a thing of the past, and I just focused on, trying to
Did you
make some
feel from
cash.
your background that it was harder for you in the world of business or not?
Not at all. But, I didn't really know anything about business. I just learned as much as I could about sales. But, when I started my first business, I really understood that quite quickly. There was a lot I didn't understand. Money, for example. I mean, most entrepreneurs don't really understand a great deal about money when they start off.
So they understand about the product they want to sell?
Yeah, potentially, yeah.
And this was you had some success, but your undoing, as it were, which came a few years later. What actually happened?
At that time, I had a business that was selling to, it was hotel rooms, it was hotel broking, and I'd got millions quite